Hey, welcome. Today I want to dig into some questions I've been receiving about bike chains. The questions fall in the range of, why did my bike chain fall off? Why are my gears slipping or clicking? And the most common, what is that noise? They all fall into this area called your drivetrain. Grab some gloves, grab some coffee, and let's figure out what is happening with your chain and how to prevent it. Look below at chapters to skip ahead if you know your bike symptoms and don't want this full overview. To understand what is happening with your chain, we need to understand the parts and the anatomy of your drivetrain. So the most common setup is what you see here. We have a chain, and then in the front we have your cranks, which have 1 to 3 chain rings on them. And that's what those teeth are. Those are on individual chain rings. In the back, we have more gears, ranging from 1 to 12. This could be called various things depending on your setup, from a freewheel to cassette to cog. In this video, I'm going to call it your rear gears. Number one, by far, is the lack of lube or over lubing. You want your chain to glisten like your face after a power walk around the block. Not too sweaty, not dirty, just glistening. If you're not sure how to lube your chain, well, you can do it in a fancy stand like this, or you can simply lean your bike up against a wall. You're gonna pull up your kickstand if it's in the way, because we're gonna need to be able to back pedal and move that chain around. So to lube, you're gonna need a couple of basic things. Lube, and then a towel to clean off your chain and wipe off the excess. To clean off your chain, you're just gonna take your towel and very gently, we're going to grab the lower part of your chain and backpedal 3 to 4 times. Once your towel is not removing any more crud and grit, you're gonna lube your chain. All we're gonna do is, in the same method that you cleaned your chain, we're going to very gently be lubing these chain links as you're backpedaling. And just kind of find a section of your chain that you can easily access and make sure that it's not getting on your tire or rim or anything like that. While you're backpedaling, if you hear any squeaking or noises from back here, you can also clean off and lube your pulleys in the back. They have little bearings in between where they're spinning, and those do get dried out and start squeaking. And then last but not least, if you're working on a cargo bike or a mountain bike, they might have this guide pulley in the middle, and we want to make sure that is rolling freely, just like those derailleur pulleys in the back. Now that you've lubed your chain, I want you to leave it for a little bit. You're going to give it a few minutes to soak in. Let's pretend that it's been sitting. You're going to grab that towel, go to a clean section of it, and backpedal again, cleaning off the excess. We're just trying to get inside of those bushings, not the outside. The timing of how often you need to lube is really dependent on where you ride, how often you ride, and what conditions you ride in. Here in North Carolina, I'm typically lubing once a month, unless it's super dry in the summer or after it rains. Let's say lubing doesn't fix your problem. Then the next common problem is that something is worn. As your chain rotates, you have metal on metal. With time, torque, and just mileage, the metal wears down. This happens even faster with a mid-drive electric bike that apply just an insane amount of torque to your drivetrain. This one tool is probably my most common tool when checking over bikes other than a 3-way Allen. It is a chain checker, and it is measuring the distance between the links of a chain. As you wear down your chain, the little bushings wear down and that distance grows greater, causing chain wear. The goal is to catch your chain before it's too worn and wearing out your chainring or your rear gears. If you have a chain, you definitely want a chain checker. So check your chain. If it's over 75% worn, then it may have also worn out either your rear gears or your front chainring. The next thing that might have happened is after you replace your chain, you might be getting slipping or the chain is getting stuck in your chainring as you pedal. Typically it happens down here where you're pedaling and this gathers up and then finally releases, making a terrible noise and just makes your bike ride awful. If you're getting a slipping sensation when applying torque to your pedals or getting that what we call chain suck, then your old chain wore down the metal on your rear gears or your chainring and they will need to be replaced. If your chain is making a rattling noise, even though it is lubed, or the chain is falling off the front or rear gears, then something is not aligned properly somewhere in your drivetrain. I'm going to run through the most common scenarios of this adjustment. The first one, if it's a newer bike or you've recently had a tune-up, your cables are not adjusted properly. You can tell this because you go to shift and there might be a delay, or you overshift and then it drops back down into gear. I will make another video on this, but for now, look up how to adjust bike gears. The next common thing is that your derailleur limit screws are not adjusted properly. This can happen when a bike is new, or if you recently installed new front or rear gears, you just slightly have to adjust that derailleur side to side to line up with those gears. And the limit screws do exactly that. It's limiting the chain from falling off. These aren't things you commonly adjust except when replacing gears or the bike's new, but if they aren't set up properly, then your chain will fall off either into the wheel or come down. So look up how to adjust bike limit screws. The other thing that can give you this same problem, if suddenly this started happening, then something is bent. If your bike has fallen over or you shifted under extreme load, then you could have bent something. Typically, it's your derailleur hanger. That's this little piece hanging off the back of the bike with your derailleur. This is now a replaceable part on most bikes because it is the first thing to bend when you drop your bike on its side or when you're shifting climbing, which you shouldn't do, by the way. There's a special tool to check this, which I don't recommend most people to invest in. Unless you're really getting into home bike maintenance, go visit your local bike shop. Oh, and don't try bending it until you have a replacement one. They do snap fairly easily because they're aluminum. I personally have one of each derailleur hangers for my various bikes. I travel with them, I keep them with me on big trips because if something happens to my derailleur, I'm out of luck. Moving on to the next common bent thing is your derailleur cage. And that's this arm hanging down. If that derailleur hanger is straight, but the derailleur is kind of tilting, it's typically tilting in towards the wheel, your cage is probably bent. And this is something you want to be really careful bending back, but it is possible. Just sometimes after you bend it back, you're now going to get a wiggle in there, so your shifting might not be precise. Next thing to check is going to be that your guide pulley is lined up. This is something I see on cargo bikes where the drivetrain is super long, so they've added this midline guide pulley. Sometimes it's on the top, sometimes it's on the bottom, and this is basically adding tension to your drivetrain. You'll also see it on mountain bikes to add tension for when you're bouncing down the trail. This should be perfectly in line with your chain on each end of the gear range. So when you're at the highest and the lowest, you want to make sure this is lined up very, very well, just as needed. How do you prevent these things from happening? Well, some of them are wear items, right? You're riding your bike, that's wonderful, and you're just gonna wear out parts because it's metal on metal. Keep checking that chain to try and prevent excessive premature wear. Next big thing is do not shift under load. If you are climbing, you've got to sit down, unweight your pedals for a second when shifting. You can also practice predicting your hills and shifting to an easier gear before you need it. If you have an internally geared hub, you have to stop pedaling for a second while you're shifting. The next thing would be if your bike falls over, check it out before you ride away. This is the most expensive error I see. A bike tips over and that derailleur is slightly bent, but someone doesn't realize it, stomps on the pedal to ride away, probably feeling slightly embarrassed that the bike fell over, and bang, the chain and derailleur are now snapped. Maybe into the wheel, ruined a lot of things. I also see this after bikes are moved or smushed into someone's car. So just make sure if anything comes in impact with this side of your bike to gently check it over, pedal, have somebody hold up your bike seat while you're pedaling and shifting, and just make sure everything's straight and in line. And the last thing is, if you hear something, try to remind yourself and take time to figure out what it is. Sometimes your pedals are squeaking, sometimes something's rattling, and maybe it's safe, but you want to make sure. I'm often seen talking to my phone as I'm test riding various sample bikes. Hey Siri, remind me at 8 p.m. tonight to check that weird noise in my pedals. It's so easy to get home, you've forgotten until the next time you get on the bike. So honestly, if you do all the things we just went over, your bike will be much more reliable and safer. All right, that was a lot of talking. Let me know what questions or tips you have in the comments. And thanks so much for watching all the way to the end. Till next time, stay well, stay good, and remember to bike more and worry less.